I am Alan Hills, and welcome to the College of St. Rose's movie review and discussion podcast, Cutting to the Chase, brought to you by the Campus Radio Club, Radio St. Rose. So, I wanted to do something a little interesting this week since I was totally absent last week. I didn't do a podcast at all because I was swamped with, midterms and all other kinds of commitments here. Hey, and that's the life being a communications major, aside from having homework assignments due, you also have a lot of clubs and entertainment projects due that just take up a lot of your time, and they're all great things, but I still want to make up for being absent last week. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a bit of a double feature today. I'm going to talk about the movie I wanted to talk about last week, which is a new home media release, and then I'm going to talk about a brand new theatrical release that I just saw, and it was really great. So here we go. So the first movie I wanted to discuss in this double feature is a movie that I saw over the summer. It was one of the last big summer movies since it was an August release. And I really liked it despite all the other things everyone else had to say about it. And I wanted to share some of my opinions because I actually thought it was pretty good. The movie I'm talking about is Mile 22. It was released in August 2018, and it stars the one and only Mark Wahlberg, of course, who is always awesome in everything that he does. So yeah, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Mile 22 is actually now available on digital, so you should definitely download it and watch it. The Blu-ray will be coming out on November 13th, so be sure to mark your calendars. I want to say that if you think the film is bad, thanks to the predominantly bad reviews and the incredibly low Rotten Tomatoes rating, you really are missing out on some good stuff. Mile 22 really is an insightful movie, and I will say that the critics really have failed to do their research. It really is disappointing, especially when it comes to a term that I really like to use a lot called paratext. When I took comm theory last semester, and that's communication theory, we learned about the term paratext, and I focused my final project on it using Avengers Infinity War as an example. Paratexts surround us in media today, and especially with movies. Paratexts aren't the media messages themselves, but the surrounding pieces of factual and fundamental information that define the media message as a whole, whatever it may be. When it comes to movies, things like the posters, the cast, the trailers, the TV spots, every piece of information that exists outside of the movie and counts as its own unique factor is considered a paratext. And it really is quite fascinating. I really liked learning about it. I did my final project on Avengers Infinity War, and I tried to determine certain paratextual elements surrounding it and how it defined the movie, like the posters, the trailers, the TV spots, and so yeah, paratexts are pretty fascinating, and Mile 22 is loaded with paratext just like any other movie is. And Mile 22 is an interesting case because it shows an example of history as paratext. Many history films are made, and those pieces of history count as the paratext because they're those pieces of information that exist outside of the movie that count as their own unique thing. So yeah, history is a great example of paratext. Mile 22 is not strictly a true story, but it is based on real things. It is based on the CIA's ground unit and the hardships that they have to endure when other methods fail. And this was said all over the news, and I think critics really should learn to be more media savvy instead of being in the game just to see a movie without any knowledge of it. Paratexts are so important, and I feel that no one took the paratext into consideration when they saw Mile 22, and I really am just so disappointed about that because the paratexts really define the movie, and critics really need to take the paratext into better consideration in the future, and I certainly hope they do. So, Mile 22 is Wahlberg's fourth collaboration with Peter Berg, who personally is one of my all-time favorite directors. And he is an incredibly talented director at that. The previous collaborations were 2013's Lone Survivor, 2016's Deepwater Horizon, and 2017's Patriots Day. And what all these movies have in common are their depictions of American heroes. Aside from collaborating with Mark Wahlberg, Peter Berg has done some other cool things as well on his own. He made a cool action movie in 2003 called The Rundown, starring The Rock and Sean William Scott, which is very funny and very well done. I highly recommend that you watch it. It's one of my personal favorites. And he even made that cool superhero movie with Will Smith called Hancock. I think it was even made in 2006, and I read somewhere that it was considered a superhero movie, and I haven't seen it, which is totally ridiculous. It looks like a very popular movie since I see it everywhere, and I think they play it on television a lot, so I definitely should watch that sometime. Peter Berg's one flop, though, is the movie Battleship, which was terrible. Battleship did have some cool parts. The acting is pretty decent. I like Taylor Kitsch and Liam Neeson. I don't know anyone who doesn't, but overall the movie was pretty ridiculous. So, but Battleship doesn't count though. Peter Berg is a very talented director. He probably didn't have a lot of creative say in that movie, so I don't like to count Battleship as a part of Peter Berg's very impressive filmmaking resume. So getting back to Peter Berg's collaborations with Mark Wahlberg, they're all incredible movies, and I'm going to sum them up a little bit for you just in case you haven't seen them, because you really should. The first collaboration was 2013's Lone Survivor, which is a brilliant combat film and one of my personal favorites, which tells the story of a group of Navy SEALs who were sent to kill a Taliban leader. It is a true story. It's based on the book of the same name by Marcus Luttrell, who Mark Wahlberg plays. And it basically gets messed up and they all get killed except for Mark Wahlberg. It really is an honorable movie that shows the heroism of our military and the Navy SEALs. So it has honorable intentions, which is why you should definitely watch it. And Peter Berg has really established himself as, you know, an honorable director when it comes to those type of subplots. And their second collaboration was Deepwater Horizon, which is named after the oil rig of the same name that exploded in the Gulf of Mexico when all the oil shot out into the Gulf a few years ago. I'm sure you all remember that. That was pretty scary, and it took them forever to clog the pipe. I have no idea why they didn't act immediately, so that was a pretty rough situation. But anyway, the whole film goes beyond that by telling the story of the brave men and women who worked that oil rig when the accident occurred, and many explosions occurred, parts of the oil rig got destroyed, and many men and women died. You know, it wasn't just about how sad it was that we lost the oil. It was about the sadness of losing all those brave, nice people, and for the second time, Peter Berg proved himself as an honorable director when it comes to that type of subplot, as I just said before. And their last collaboration before Mile 22 was the brilliant movie Patriots Day that was released in 2017 for its widespread theatrical release, and that is just a brilliantly done movie, and it is very, very realistic too. You really feel like you're there. It's about the manhunt for the Boston Marathon bombers, and it is just so incredible. I mean, it's awful too because of what happened in that event, and what they depict is realistic and very sad, and in a sense that makes the movie, you know, awful and almost a hard watch because it's so traumatizing. But either way, it is still an excellent movie. It shows the heroism of the law enforcement people who caught the terrorists, and it just shows the bravery of all the Boston people who are still striving to live life and be happy and to be one united Boston. It really is so awesome. So yeah, Mark Wahlberg and Peter Berg really do make a good team when it comes to these honorable movies. So with all that being said, Mile 22 is no different, since it basically tells the same kind of story. And while it's not necessarily true, like I said before, Berg said in an interview that it is inspired by the, quote, unorthodox actions of the CIA's ground unit. It says on every poster, and Mark Wahlberg basically says the same thing in the movie, option 1 is diplomacy, option 2 is the military, this is the third option. You really need to remember that fact when watching this film, because only then can you really appreciate the film's fundamentals. And I'll give you a little information on the plot of the movie so you know what to expect. Again, here's an example of paratext. When you read the plot online, that's a piece of basic information that you're reading outside of the movie, and that is strictly a paratext, so here it is. Mile 22 tells the story of CIA operatives somewhere in Asia, and a police officer with crucial information turns himself in, but he'll only give them the information if they get him out of the country. So they have to transport him through 22 miles of enemy territory to do it, and they just face the most dangerous obstacles in the process. It really is quite horrible. But yeah, it is a very Lone Survivor-esque situation where American defenders have to face the most terrifying obstacles imaginable. So yeah, it is heavily comparable to Lone Survivor. And the same thing with Deepwater Horizon. You know, an oil rig being blown, and they all have to stay alive. You know, they all have to stay alive in Mile 22. So that's how you can compare the two. And as for Patriots Day, that's not as easy to compare, but, you know, the heroism is still there and the unbelievable obstacles are still there. Like, I remember a fight scene towards the end of Patriots Day where they're trying to catch one of the terrorists, and it's in the middle of a little Boston suburb, you know, all these nice little old houses, but yet they're so big and beautiful, and the cops are trying to pursue them, and in the process, a little Boston suburb is just being turned into, you know, a war zone, and this transport that these CIA officers are trying to conduct is immediately turned into a war zone as a result, and it really is quite horrifying. So yeah, Mile 22 is impressive in that way, and it should count as a part of Peter Berg's honorable movie resume. In fact, it should count as a noteworthy part of Peter Berg and Mark Wahlberg's honorable movie resume. So don't take it for granted. Give it a try. The character development, on the other hand, is basically understandable, and while they could have spent a little more time on it, I really think that they didn't have to. In fact, the opening credits spend very in-depth time introducing Wahlberg's character, Jack Silva, through cool graphics that resemble files and surveillance that were pretty slick. The lead female character, Alice Kerr, is an operative who's trying to balance her duties with being away from her family life. She was very excellent. Peter Berg even has a cameo in the movie as her husband. They're FaceTiming each other, and he's getting all mad at her, for being away and having her own career and everything. But yeah, the fact that Peter Berg is brave enough to act is pretty cool, and he does seem like a really good actor. I wish he would do it more, and maybe in the future, maybe he really will be in more. I remember reading in the news recently that Mark Wahlberg and Peter Berg shared a brotherly bond and that they're really good buddies, so I think they should be in a movie together. Is there a future duo being cooked up here? I definitely hope so, because we're about to get one this December. As you all know, Clint Eastwood directed American Sniper back in 2014. It had its widespread theatrical release in 2015. Clint Eastwood only directed the movie, he wasn't in it, and it starred Bradley Cooper. But in December, there is a crime movie coming out called The Mule, which is based on a New York Times Magazine article of the same name called The Sinaloa Cartel's 90-Year-Old Drug Mule. It was written by a man named Sam Dolnick. And it tells the story of a 90-year-old man who transported drugs for a cartel, just like the title implies. And this new movie, The Mule, stars Clint Eastwood as that very drug transporter. And who's playing the cop tracking him down? Bradley Cooper. And the film's cunning trailer shows them together all very briefly. First, the camera is just focused on Clint Eastwood, and as he turns to look behind him, the camera moves a little bit, and it does this amazing rack focus where it shifts from Clint Eastwood to Bradley Cooper. And see, there's an example of a paratext right there. These two guys meeting up for the first time on camera in a fictional manner is considered a paratext, since it is a reference to American Sniper, and seeing that moment in that trailer is just so chilling. And that's why Mark Wahlberg and Peter Berg should definitely do that. Peter Berg seems like a great actor. They consider each other brothers, and they would be really great together, so I really hope they do that. But yeah, the cast is pretty amazing, and Peter Berg should have been in the main cast of Mile 22. I really would have liked to have seen that. But getting back to my talking points on the characters, and by that I mean every other character in the movie, Iko Uwais plays Lenore, whose character is incredibly critical since he's the police officer that the operatives have to extract. Uwais' performance is really cold and cunning, and it really is amazing, and Peter Berg really thinks that he is going to be the next big star because of his martial arts talents. They looked pretty impressive on film, and yeah, I wish I could have seen them a little bit better, though, because Lenore's fight scenes were a bit shaky. It had that shaky cam footage that, the Bourne films are famous for, but I think it was actually worse in Mile 22, so I would have liked to have seen them a little more clearly, so I could have known exactly what Berg was talking about, but still, Uwais' acting, phenomenal. As for the rest of the characters, not all of them are just there in this film, with the exception of Ronda Rousey and John Malkovich's roles. Luckily, these two celebrities are good enough on their own, though, that their characters don't really have to be explained. They gave us enough. They really did. Ronda Rousey's already established herself, as an accomplished wrestler and actress. I believe her first movie was The Expendables 3, and she was in Furious 7, so, her character doesn't need to be explained. Her presence really is enough, so. And the same goes for John Malkovich. I mean, the man is a legend, and, he doesn't have to be explained. And plus, he was with Mark Wahlberg in Deepwater Horizon, which probably indicates that he likes working with Peter Berg. So my point is, those characters don't need to be explained. We're just here to see a good movie. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty impressed. So just to sum everything up, the cast of Mile 22 is near perfect, and I personally have no complaints. So I just want to reiterate the factual importance here of Mile 22. It is based on real things. It's based on the CIA's ground unit and the hardships that they have to go through sometimes. And I highly recommend that you watch this movie. It is worth your time. It is very quick, but it is very effective. It had an effect on me personally as a movie viewer, and I definitely think you should watch it. I'll remind you one more time of the release dates. It is now available on digital, but the Blu-ray, if you still like to use Blu-ray, comes out November 13th. So be sure to watch that movie. I'm sure you will like it and appreciate it for what it is. Plus, they plan to do more with it in the future. I hope they do, but they might not be able to now because of the bad reviews, unfortunately. But Peter Berg said that it is intended to be the first film of a franchise. And they're also planning a web series called The Kiev Exchange, which tells the same kind of story, which Peter Berg is set to direct. So with that being said, please give Mile 22 a try. I'm sure you will like it, and you'll be glad that you did. So now I want to move on to the next movie of this double feature. This time, and for the first time in a while, maybe for the first time in this podcast even, we are going to talk about a brand new theatrical release. I don't know if it's still in theaters all over the country right now. It might still be in select theaters, but still, I'm very excited to be talking about a new theatrical release right now, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. About a week ago, I finally got a ticket for Robert Redford's new film, The Old Man and the Gun, since it was finally being screened locally. The movie was released on September 28th, and I rapidly searched online for a local showtime, but I couldn't find any. This led me to the conclusion that it must have been a limited release, and that can be a real pain sometimes, especially if you're a huge movie buff like me. That's what's inconvenient about, limited releases. Some of the best movies are made independently, and, because they're not given a big enough release, they're not that popular. And I don't blame the industries or the directors or, anybody else, but there aren't enough tiny movie theaters around the country anymore that screen these kind of movies, and I really wish there were, because a lot of these filmmakers have a lot of good things to bring to the table through independent films. But there is a convenience of limited releases. When a film is given a limited release, it has the potential to receive critical praise, and then it will be given a widespread theatrical release. That is the case with most Oscar nominees. So Lone Survivor, in fact, that we just talked about, started out as a limited release. It received critical praise, and then it was given a widespread theatrical release. Patriots Day also got a limited release, and then that was released nationally to the same critical praise. And so, yeah, the convenience about these limited releases is that a short amount of time is given for people to respond to the movie and to see what they think of it, so that the people working on the movies can decide if they should be distributed in a wider fashion. So yeah, that's another big convenience of limited releases. I wouldn't call Fox Searchlight a company that does independent films and limited releases. Fox Searchlight is the company behind The Old Man and the Gun, but the kind of films that they make almost look like independent films in the ways that they're filmed and distributed. But anyway, yeah, it's still all cool. And, some of the best films start out with limited releases, and when they get good enough praise, they can be distributed in a wider fashion. And I think that was the case here with The Old Man and the Gun. The praise that it received earned it its very sudden and quick, yet very much earned national release. So yeah, it is overall pretty cool. So The Old Man and the Gun is very original, and yet it's very creative at the same time. But Redford's acting is still the most special part about this movie. He was going to retire from acting after being in this, but he eventually took that statement back, since he didn't like the high amount of publicity that he got after saying that. It was pretty funny. This role would have been a perfect farewell, however, given the kind of role he plays, which is a career criminal character that is fundamentally fascinating. I remember being completely surprised by that fact ever since I saw the first trailer on YouTube. The film is actually based on a New Yorker article which told the story of this character, whose name was Forrest Tucker. He was a San Quentin escapee and a legendary bank robber. When he robs banks in the film, he shows the managers his gun, but he manages to astound them with his gentlemanly attitude every single time, which is a very unusual thing to see in a movie, and this is a complete violation of the cinematic bank robbing formula, but in a good way. I mean, you never see the victims of a bank robbery so fascinated by the gentleman who robbed them. It is very, very strange. But the movie has a charming kind of sophistication about it that reminds me of the Steven Spielberg classic Catch Me If You Can, which, if you all remember, told the story of William Frank Abagnale Jr., who was a criminal who created fake checks and posed as 3 different kinds of occupations to get so much money. And it was really cool, but he was just there to steal the money and to be slick and cool, and he didn't try to hurt anybody. And, this was the same kind of movie, and that's why I really enjoyed it. It really reminded me of that. But because of the aesthetic and the locations that it took place in, it also reminded me of another movie I saw recently that was a Best Picture nominee, in fact, at the Oscars, called Hell or High Water. And that was about 2 bank robbers. Chris Pine is one of them. Jeff Bridges is the sheriff chasing them down. And they're robbing banks just so they can solve, financial issues with their family and stuff like that. But still, even that got out of hand. For the first half of the movie, or maybe the first 85% of the movie, they rob banks, but they eventually turn to killing innocent people just to get their jobs done. And, ultimately that kind of ruined the movie for me. The senseless killing really made me lose interest, and it's, so disappointing. Yeah, it was cool when Jeff Bridges met up with Chris Pine at the end, suggesting that, we're gonna settle this man-to-man soon, possibly have, an old-fashioned Wild West gun draw, but still, they resorted to killing innocent people in the movie, and it was ultimately ruined for me. But none of that happens in The Old Man of the Gun, so it's more like Catch Me If You Can in a sense. It has all the charm of Catch Me If You Can while losing out on the unnecessary bloodshed of Hell or High Water. So still, yeah, but even still, it brings a new kind of formula to the bank robbing element of cinema, and it was a pretty fun watch, so. But getting back to Redford and the main character, he brings a very cool amount of charm to his interpretation of Tucker. He has such a polite personality and dapper style that you almost forget his true colors. Plus, even if you do, you don't want to care. This acting job really is just as legendary as Redford himself, let me tell you. Such is the case when Tucker meets Sissy Spacek's character, whose name was Jewel. She was a widow who has a horse farm and craves adventure just as much as Tucker does. And somehow she is so impressed with Tucker's lifestyle that the two just click instantly. These 2 characters have some really pleasant interactions with each other, which causes a huge shift in tone that's strong enough to make you forget what the movie has been about the whole time. In fact, Tucker even comes face to face with the detective chasing him down, who's played by Casey Affleck. Even though this scene is pretty stressful, it mostly involves Tucker passing on some of his advice on life to the detective, and it's pretty cool. So while the entire cast of this movie is a true knockout, Redford really takes the cake. Aside from the acting, I found the film's direction and visual style to be particularly special. The movie was both written and directed by David Lowery, who designed the movie to actually look like a movie from 1981 instead of making it look like a movie that only takes place in 1981. I really think it is, the Stranger Things effect, the way they filmed that show. You really feel like you're in the 80s. All the detail is so realistic and everything. And I'm sure David Lowery saw Stranger Things and brought that same kind of, interpretation to The Old Man of the Gun. So many movies and TV shows try to get authentic with that as well, The parody TV series Documentary Now, starring Bill Hader and Fred Armisen, in which they spoof celebrated documentaries. The footage is authentic when it needs to be, and I remember there was an episode of The X-Files called The Postmodern Prometheus, where it's designed to look like a 50s monster thriller. In fact, that episode is included in Chris Carter's Top 10. Chris Carter is the creator of The X-Files, and when Fox announced the revival in 2016, Chris Carter came up with that list so fans could brush up. And so I haven't seen the episode, but still I appreciate the effort to reintroduce classic filmmaking styles. So yeah, I like how The Old Man and the Gun stayed true to that possibility, and it was great. Plus the fact that the story is mostly set in small southern towns really makes it look like a picture Redford would have participated in back then. The music is also very suitable, as composer Daniel Hart uses some of his jazzy compositions during Tucker's robberies. Naturally, it works very well. Many country songs are also used as well, and these are very old-school country songs that are very deep and emotional, and it's just the kind of country music that we barely hear anymore. The most cunning of these country songs, however, is a song performed by Jackson C. Frank, and it's called Blues Run the Game. In fact, it was used in the first trailer, which made the movie feel, so emotional and special to me, given that it was supposed to be Robert Redford's final film role. And yet, even still, it looked like it was going to be an amazing movie full of cool things. And, the soft yet cunning nature of, Blues Run the Game really drew me into it and really made me want to see the movie. So check out the song on Spotify. It is a super good song, and thanks to the miracle that is Spotify, I can own it and listen to it whenever I want, as many times as I want, for free. So that's pretty lit. And so, yeah, you should definitely check out the song. So just to sum everything up, The Old Man and the Gun is very classic. It has a classic story, a classic look, and a classic lead. It really does. So if the movie is still playing in the theater near you, I highly recommend that you go and see it. You really will like it if you're a film buff like me, and you really shouldn't waste your time. It really is worthwhile, and it's just awesome. So you should definitely see it. And that's all the time we have. I'm Alan Hills, and this has been Cutting to the Chase. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week.